Hi, for this video I wanted to talk about units of analysis and cover some of the assignment which covered units analysis and dimensions of time. So when we're looking at units of analysis, you are essentially looking at who or what you are studying. It is essentially akin to your observation. So when we go back to think about the research article that you were required to read, we discussed in the previous video that the unit of analysis was drug court participants. Specifically, it was drug court participants from the years 2008 to 2013 in a Midwestern Metropolitan Drug Court. But what you see here, of course, on this next slide is that there's four different types of unit of analysis: the individual, group, organization, and social artifact. Now we really just want to concern ourselves with the first three. Of course, when we looked at that research article, 824 participants, that's at the individual level. And when you're looking at the individual level, it doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It just can't be a group of, say, people or events or something of that nature. It just has to be individual. So individuals are frequently studied in criminological research, but so are groups and organizations. So when we look at groups, we are looking at a collection, say, of people. For instance, like a gang, or I frequently use on my on-campus class the idea of studying different classes within criminal justice, or just all my research methods courses that I've taught while at Ball State. So I teach 1 to 2 research methods courses a semester, and I've been here now nearly 4 years. So if I wanted to study, say, grades of the classes or the class averages, then that would be a group. Similarly, and this is where it gets kind of tricky, is when we look at organizations. Organizations are, of course, groups, generally a group of individuals, but the group is something a little bit more official. So you see here on the PowerPoint, correctional facilities. So if we wanted to look at the misconduct, prison misconduct, based on particular Indiana penitentiaries, we might compare, say, Putnamville and Pendleton. Putnamville being a medium security prison, Putnamville being a medium security, Pendleton being a maximum security. That would be more of an organization. I don't really get too caught up when we're looking at unit of analysis on the differentiation between group and organization, but just recognize there is a difference. Primarily what you want to recognize, and on the assignment is what you really want to recognize, of course, is between individual and group. Now our last one is social artifact, which I don't pay a ton of attention to, mainly because although we may use social artifacts to mine data, such as in a newspaper article or, say, police reports, we eventually turn that artifact into either a individual unit of analysis or even a group unit of analysis. So when you're looking at police reports, there may be an event, an encounter between a suspect and a police officer. Well, you're going to get the information out of that based on a police report. You know, what exactly happened during that encounter? Was, say, the suspect respectful and polite to the police officer, and vice versa? So you're going to use the artifact, but eventually, as you put it into, say, workable data, you are going to turn it into an individual level, more like an event. Although two people are interacting and you could say, well, that's kind of a group, really what you're studying is an event, and the event is the encounter. So I don't concentrate too much on social artifact, and in fact, I don't think it comes up on the test that covers chapters 4 and 5, because we don't really use it as such when we are coding or mining data into a quantitative data set. So, switching over, let me pull up the assignment. We look here at our exercise 1. And what I wanted you to identify, because research methods is kind of cumulative, you're building information on top of information, is I wanted you to be able to identify the independent variable, the dependent variable, the unit of analysis, and some of the attributes. And of course, like I sent out that somewhat tardy email, not all elements had to be used, or all letters had to be used at on one particular scenario, and some can be used more than once. So we look here at this article examines the effects of sentence severity on crime rates. So what is sentence severity exactly? It's vague, but that vagueness actually makes it our independent variable. It is the attributes within the sentence severity that really brings you specifics, such as sentence of 25 years to life. That's a specific attribute under variable sentence severity. So that would be B. So what you have here is A, B. High crime rate is an attribute of the dependent variable, because crime rate in and of itself is just the dependent variable. And of course, low crime rate is also an attribute of the dependent variable. So how to identify the independent and dependent variable? You have to remember that the dependent variable is affected by the independent variable. So in these scenarios, the independent variable is going to, at least in part, cause a dependent variable. So we look at the effects of sentence severity on crime rate. So it's sentence severity causing the crime rate. So looking at scenario number 2, we see that the clients of public defenders plead guilty more often than the clients of private defense attorneys. So, our public defender is not in the independent variable. It is an attribute of the independent variable, as the independent variable is attorney or attorney type. So when you look at attorneys, okay, that's the independent variable, and the types of independent, or of the types of attorneys, is public defender, private attorney, and so forth and so on. So when you look at guilty plea, of course, that is an attribute of the dependent variable, because a guilty plea is not a variable of itself. That variable is plea. That's the dependent variable. So its attributes are guilty plea, not guilty plea. And generally, when you're thinking of plea, you often think of it dichotomously as guilty plea, not guilty plea, though I do recognize there's also no contest pleas. So we also look here at smoking marijuana among juveniles leads to their use of harder drugs. Okay, so marijuana use. Well, marijuana use is the independent variable because we're specifying it here. So we're looking at marijuana and how it affects juveniles and their use of harder drugs. So use of harder drugs at number 12, if we go up here, is the dependent variable. And juvenile and young adults, that's what we're studying. I guess just specifically juveniles. Thus, that's our unit of analysis. Now, cocaine and heroin. Cocaine and heroin we can consider to be categorized in this scenario as a harder drug than marijuana. So, both of those are attributes of the dependent variable. If our dependent variable is harder drugs, its attributes are cocaine and heroin, at least on the choices that we have. Let's then look at this one, because we get a little complicated because we start looking at groups here. So large police departments are more likely to require applicants to have a college diploma than small departments. So we're really kind of comparing the size of departments and its effect on, say, education requirement. So police departments in general is our unit of analysis. What level of that is, you can either consider it a group or an organization. It's more official, so I would consider it an organization. Now, small police departments is the attribute, because if you look at 18, size of a police department is in fact the independent variable. And it can be either small, medium, or large. College diploma is an attribute of the dependent variable, because number 20, education requirement, is in fact the dependent variable. Because some police departments, are going to require a college diploma, while others' educational requirement may just call for a high school diploma or equivalency. So now we have a good beat on that. I want to scroll down on our time dimensions. Time dimensions, of course, if we look at our dimensions of time, we have two different types of time dimensions. We have cross-sectional studies, which actually do not consider time at all, and then we have three types of longitudinal studies: trend, cohort, and panel. If you read, hopefully you read the chapter, we know that trend studies look at changes within a population over time, kind of a snapshot. And you can take individual snapshots. So if you look at the Uniform Crime Report and you look at crime rates, we then can see a snapshot of what the crime rate was in 1990. And then we can take a snapshot of what the crime rate was in 1995, in 2000, in 2005, and so on. What we see through that series of snapshots is that crime has been going down pretty steadily since 1990. But when we look at, say, a cohort study, we're really looking at a segment of the population and how they carry on over time. So I will talk about cohort study. Unfortunately, the program I use only allows for 15-minute videos, so I will pick up with the continued video here shortly.